Hello, my friends. I'm officially back from maternity leave and recording my first podcast episode since everything kind of prior to this had been pre-batched while Aiden was still in my tummy. So, in case you missed it, I have officially had my first child, Aiden. He is an absolute delight. I feel like we've gotten so lucky that he's been a really easy baby, good sleeper, good eater, generally not too fussy, and I just love him so much. Motherhood is like such an incredibly wild, rewarding, beautiful experience. And of course, very hard too. So I wanted to share this episode. I've got a lot of questions while I was on leave and since returning to leave, asking about, how did you go on maternity leave? Different therapists sharing that they're pregnant or wanting to get pregnant and not really sure what to do. And so I wanted to just sort of share this because I know that it is quite different to take maternity leave when you work a corporate job, when you work a 9 to 5, when you work for somebody else and your maternity leave is sort of like prescribed and chosen for you versus when you are a business owner and when you are a therapist in particular, there's a lot more nuance that goes into it. If you are somebody who is planning a maternity leave, I would also go back and listen to episodes 59, 60, and 61 if you have not already. That is a 3-part series I recorded before I had my son, really about how I prepped financially for maternity leave, how I prepped with my team, and how I prepped my content. Okay, so let's dive in. There's definitely some struggles that therapists face when taking maternity leave, right? We have no HR department, we have no paid leave, so you're really needing to plan in advance financially. There's no clear return date that magically is going to feel right. And our work is like very identity focused. It's emotional and it's, flexible for better or for worse. And I think that we don't often talk enough about this feeling that at least came up for me a lot in leave of feeling like I missed sort of like being an adult, missed using my brain, missed having like real adult conversations. And so I think that that is something that, can be really fulfilling about returning to work. Okay, so the way that I'm going to break this episode up is we are going to talk a little bit about like the emotional and identity shifts of returning to work. We're going to talk about like the logistics and structures, and then also some like business specific things as well. So let's start off with emotional stuff. One thing that I was really not prepared for before getting pregnant and like really thinking about maternity leave was both like the duality of the beauty and the guilt that comes with having unlimited choices as a business owner, right? So a lot of my friends who have had kids have said, you know, like, I wish my maternity leave was longer, or I wish I didn't have to return to work, or I wish I could return to work part time. But because they had full time corporate jobs, that was dictated for them, right? Some got 6 weeks, some got 12 weeks, some got, 4 months, 5 months. But that choice was made. And when it was time for them to return to work, they returned to work as usual, right? They were right back doing 9 to 5, whether that was in office or 3 days a week or virtually, like it was dictated for them by their employer. And when I was deciding what I wanted to do, I was asking a lot of friends, like, at what point did you start to feel like, you had mental capacity for work? At what point did you start to feel like you were getting a little bored of maternity leave and maybe wanted something to do? And I just found those conversations to actually be really not helpful because it was just like such a wildly different experience. Whereas when I talk to other therapists who were in private practice, other business owners, those conversations I actually found to be much more useful because I think as entrepreneurs and as therapists, our brains are just wired a little bit differently. Um, you know, when you're building something that's yours, I think that there is a little bit more of a desire to return to work and a little bit more like fulfillment that comes with that too. When you're doing something that you find deeply meaningful, when you have clients that you love, when you have work that you're really excited to go back to. So, I think for me that like almost like that unlimited choice made it very difficult to decide, when should I go back? How much should I go back? What should I do in terms of childcare? What do I really want this to look like? And we're going to dive into that a little bit more. I think there's also like this identity piece, right? So like part of you is a new parent and that feels really overwhelming and beautiful as like a piece of your identity. And then for me, a lot of my identity is tied up in being a therapist and being an entrepreneur and being a business owner. And there was kind of like this push pull of needing to leave one version of myself behind in order to build a new one, right? And so I took 15 15 or 16 weeks, I can't remember, completely off of work. And that was really for me to focus on this identity of like becoming a mom and figuring out that new role. And now, as I've been returning to work, I've put that identity on hold for brief periods, right? Like a few hours here, a few hours there. And there's grief in that, but there's also like so much beauty and fulfillment in being able to turn that off and to think about something other than wake windows and feeding and development and, just to be a grown up. So I just want to name that, as a therapist, both things can be true. We know the power of and it's good to really acknowledge that for yourself and know that, just because you know this stuff as a therapist doesn't mean that it's going to be easier for you. Just because you have the clinical skills to help your clients regulate or to see, the duality of things doesn't mean that it's going to come so easily when it's you, right? So I'm just here to remind you it is normal to feel behind, to feel rusty, to feel guilty, to feel pulled in multiple directions, to feel like emotionally tender as you're returning to work with clients, as you're returning to making business decisions, making content, all of that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit of how I am structuring things and how I would suggest that you structure things as well as a therapist returning to work. I do think it's helpful to pick a return date and just sort of have a light return date, because I don't think that there will ever come a point where you are like, I am ready, today is the day, or next week is the day, right? And so part of it is just like picking something that feels good to you in terms of how much time you think you want to take off, and also like how much financial safety net you've already planned for. So if you have savings to take 2 months off work, amazing. If you have savings to take 4 or 6 months off work, amazing. But pick some number that you're like, okay, I feel like it would be good for me to start to return now, but you don't need immediate, like all of your income right away, because I would really suggest easing back into things. Um, so for me, what I picked was, initially I thought that I was going to return to work at the start of January. And I did. And I had originally planned to start childcare at that time. But as my return to work date was approaching, I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't really want my baby to go to daycare just yet. Maybe I'll wait until he's 4 months. And so I reached out to my mom and I asked her if she was able to come over to my house and watch Aiden twice a week so I could get some work done, and sort of like delay his childcare start. And I think that was both the best and worst thing that I have done. It was for me, it really solidified my decision to send Aiden to daycare. And for that, I'm like so grateful. I think that has been so helpful. But what was really shocking to me was how hard it was to have Aiden in the house while I was working, and how hard it was to try and fit work into nap times on the days that my mom was not here. So I was trying to, on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, just work during naps, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays, kind of working a full day, which for me is like 9 to 3. Um, and it was really hard. So, one, I had been like kind of toying between like, do I want to do nanny? Do I want to do daycare? And being in my house and hearing my baby cry, even though my mom was taking care of him, was just like really hard for me. And it really solidified, like, I would prefer for him to be in daycare where he can be sort of like out of sight, out of mind. I know that he's going to be well taken care of there, and that I don't feel like pulled away from work, because for me, I hear him crying and I'm like, I've got to get up and immediately stop whatever I'm doing and go help my baby, which is not super, super helpful. The other thing is, on like the days where I was watching him and trying to work between meetings or trying to work between naps, was so hard in a way that I did not expect. One, I generally consider myself to be a pretty patient person, but I found myself being really impatient with him with getting him down for naps, because I just felt like this was my time to work. Like, he needs to nap now because I have stuff I need to do. And I did not like the more frustrated, impatient version of myself that I was being as mom. I would also get really frustrated if he took like a short nap, when normally I'm very go with the flow with it. But I just had like stuff I wanted to do. And then also lately, I'll link this in the show notes in case anyone's curious, but I've seen a lot of research about screen time and how even more detrimental for babies and kids than them being in front of a screen is actually their parent being in front of a screen while they're watching them. And so, I was trying to have him like in the bouncer or on the play mat and sort of like doing a little bit of work, but I was really distracted, and it felt very unfair to my baby for me to be with him but not present. And so I'm really excited to send him to daycare where, his caretakers can be solely focused on him. And then I can get a lot of stuff done because I'm going to be uninterrupted. And when I go and leave to pick him up at 3 o'clock, we can have the whole rest of the afternoon, me and him. I can put my phone away, I can put my laptop away and really be present with him. And I think what has been really helpful for me is I felt a lot of guilt about sending Aiden to daycare. And I felt like because I work from home, because I own my own business, because my husband also works from home, even though he doesn't own his own business, he's got an employer, but he works remotely. I kind of felt like we should just watch him here. We should just find a way to make it work. And doing that for 3 weeks has really opened my eyes and has been like, this is not the best thing for me. It's not the best thing for my husband. It's not the best thing for my baby. We are sending him to daycare, and I feel super good in that decision now. So I'm not saying that's necessarily the right decision for you, but it might be helpful to just sort of like try both things out. And you might be surprised with what you are preferring after doing so. So, the other thing I would definitely recommend is returning to work progressively. So, for me, my business looks a little bit different in that therapy is not like a major source of income for me in the past year or two, as I've grown with social media and brand partnerships and business coaching and all of that. Um, but I will share a little bit of what I'm doing and what I suggest that you do if your primary mode of income is one on one therapy. So, for me, I started with brand partnerships because that is work that one, I can sort of do on my own time. Two, it feels like really creative and fulfilling. And it is a lot more passive. So that is what I started with. And then after that, I sort of returned to my VIP community for therapists and private practice academy, where I have 2 calls a month, and returning also to the marketing side of my business. So prior to going on maternity leave, I had pre-recorded tons of podcast episodes, pre-written tons of like sales emails, newsletters, planned all of my launches, all of that through the end of January. And now I am back and sort of like creating new things and being involved in that work again. Um, it's still sort of like TBD for me when I return to one on one business coaching and one on one therapy. I will be doing both at some point in 2026, but I was just kind of like, let me sort of like get a hold of the things that don't require like so much calls first, and let me see how I'm doing with like the tasks on my to-do list that are needed to keep my business running, and then we can sort of add in calls as it feels good. And I think that will be a lot easier too when I know that Aiden is at daycare a few days a week. Now, if you are a therapist who is mostly seeing one on one clients, you can still have a progressive return to work. So I would recommend, first off, like picking a few days of the week to begin. I would not jump right back into sessions Monday through Friday. Maybe you start with a Tuesday, Thursday, or something. And sort of see what that's like for you. Or also picking like hours. Maybe you're doing Monday through Friday, but instead of starting with 5 clients a day, you're starting with 2 clients a day. Some sort of reduced schedule there, I think, is really helpful. And do that for a week, for 2 weeks, see how it feels, and then continue to build. And when you are returning to work, I would focus on like bringing back your easiest clients first, right? In terms of intensity, in terms of rapport, in terms of like clinical work. So I would sort of stagger that, right? I would reach out to folks who are the easiest, the sessions you look forward to the most, and say like, hey, I'm getting ready to start taking clients again in 2 weeks. Here's my schedule. Like, let's sort of like fill in these spots. Do that for 2 weeks and then start reaching out to more people who you used to work with and letting them know that you're returning, right? And sort of taking that like step by step, I think is really helpful. I also think it's really helpful to start with existing clients who you've worked with previously before like taking on new people. I always find, new people just sort of require like more of ourselves to show up clinically as we're like doing a lot of assessments, we're getting to know people, we're building that rapport, we're trying to like, conceptualize their case, all of that. So start with getting your existing clients back on board and then start taking on new people. Um, and then in terms of schedule too, I would definitely plan for like breaks for pumping if you are breastfeeding, and definitely plan for some version of childcare. You can have the best sleeper in the world, but I think it would be so, so, so stressful to actually need a nap to happen at a specific period of time in order for you to show up and have a session with a client, whether that is nanny, spouse, parent, friend, daycare. I would definitely plan to have childcare in place for your therapy sessions. Um, the other thing too that I think sort of surprised me with returning to work is that working less doesn't necessarily feel less mentally heavy, right? Like I'm probably have been working since January, I don't know, 10, 15 hours a week. It's been like a very reduced schedule for me, but it, it's like still felt really hard because the other times I'm still being a mom, right? Like motherhood is a lot. And it's surprised me that like the times where I have been working and sort of like taking a break in that regard has actually felt a lot easier. And so that's something to think about too. Like you may want to actually work more than you thought that you did when you were pregnant, and that's okay, because work can maybe even feel like a break. So it is okay if you feel guilt in both directions, if you feel pulled, if you're wanting to work more, work less, whatever decision that is, do not make yourself wrong. Don't feel like, you should be more grateful. You should want to be more with your baby. Like there is no right or wrong there. And I think honestly, the greatest gift that you can give your child is being a happy mom and being a present mom. And so do what you need to do to make that happen. Okay. Something else I want to talk about is sort of like the business reality of maternity leave for therapists. So, we talked about like having endless options and choice when you are the one in charge, when you own your own business. And obviously that comes with some drawbacks of you have no paid leave, right? That is going to impact your income, whether it is like a total stop in income or a shift or decrease in income. And that might make you feel pressure to return sooner than feels ideal. And that's just like okay. I think that there is benefits and drawbacks to owning your own business. And, one benefit is that you can choose to take as much time off as you want. And one negative is that your income is going to be impacted by that, right? One benefit is that you are going to earn way more in private practice than you ever would working for a group practice, community mental health, nonprofit. But one drawback is you're not going to get paid leave, right? And so you are going to need to plan, you are going to need to save. Again, visit episodes 59, 60, 61 about how I sort of prepped for that. It's definitely something that I would recommend doing, 6 months, a year in advance. Definitely by the time that you get pregnant, I would start prepping. But if you have the ability to start prepping, as you're trying to conceive, I think that that is really, really helpful too. Um, the other thing that I think is like important to acknowledge is sort of the mental load of planning your leave and planning your return, right? Because it's not paid, you are going to need to make a plan. You are going to need to figure out what your savings looks like, what you're going to tell clients, when you want to return, and just take it step by step, take it day by day. The reality is that, you know, the difficulties that come with taking a maternity leave as a business owner is just sort of like a reality of your business model. And that is okay, right? It is also really, really, really okay for your first 3 months back, your first 6 months back, maybe even your first year back to not be your best in business, right? Maybe you are not having the high income months that you once did. Maybe this isn't your best year yet. Maybe this isn't the year that you get off of insurance panels and go all private pay, right? Maybe this isn't the year that you get, 50,000 new followers on Instagram. Maybe it's just the year that you survive, that you meet your expenses, that you continue working with your clients, that you feel really good, that you figure out these new rules. And taking things in stages is really, really helpful. Returning to work is a huge feat in itself. Becoming a mom is a huge feat in itself. And so do not put your pressure, like all this pressure on yourself to do everything at like level 100. If it is possible to give yourself wiggle room financially, whether that is through savings or through the support of a spouse or something like that, give yourself permission to do that. Don't like immediately need to have everything go back to exactly as it was. Okay, so to wrap up, I just really want to acknowledge I don't know, the beauty in being able to pick your own leave and the challenges that come with that. There is no right and wrong way to do this. There is no prescribed way. There is no, like, your clients also don't know the right and wrong way because there is none. So if you want to start with a few clients who feel easy and good and do that, and then a month later start taking the clients that feel more emotionally heavy, that is okay. Your clients aren't going to know that. You don't have to explain to them why they were in the second wave or whatever. do what feels good to you, do what feels good to your family, do what feels good for your baby. The other thing that I think is super helpful is reminding yourself that no decision is permanent. You can always change your mind, right? So, like, I had decided pre going on leave that I was going to send Aiden to daycare. I was kind of like toying with the idea of not, hence doing my 3 weeks of asking my mom to like help come and watch him. And then I decided, no, he's definitely going to daycare. I'm not doing that, right? So you can change your mind. I might send him to daycare and decide I hate having him out of the house and pay to have a nanny here. Who knows, right? But you can change your mind. You can try something on. You can see what works. You can return to work with clients and, say that you need to take a pause again or space out sessions. But I think honestly, the only way to really know what's going to feel good is to pick something with your best guess of what you're going to want to do and then try that thing and see how it feels. If you are looking for support with building a business that allows you to have like more space, more room to do the things that you love, I would definitely encourage you to check out my program, the Private Practice Academy Bundle. I really will help you with building a caseload of private pay clients. And I think that that is so beautiful in itself because it allows you to see less clients and still earn the same income or earn, even more income. And yes, it is definitely more marketing to have a private pay caseload than it is an insurance-based caseload. But one of the things that I have loved about it is that the marketing is stuff that you can do on your own time, right? So if you are somebody who is squeezing in work between naps, or you want to do some work in the evening, once your baby's asleep, or when your husband has a break and can watch him or whatever, I think that marketing is really good to do that because it's super flexible. Whereas, like, if you have a 10 a.m. session, you're going to be on at 10 a.m. So I definitely think that private pay can be super, super helpful if you are in a season of having limited working capacity, because you are going to earn 2, 3, 4 times as much as you would with insurance. If you are in the thick of it, if you are, pregnant, planning on a leave, if you're in a leave, if you're coming back from a leave and are so stressed by it, I just want to say, like, you are doing great no matter what you are doing. I am so proud of you. It is a lot to become a mom. It is a lot to own your own business. And yeah, I'm just totally, totally seeing you in that. If you have any other questions or you want to chat about this further, my DMs are always open. But I hope that this was super helpful for you. And I am cheering you on.